So I think that's a really interesting point, and I don't know if I really have anything specific I want to try to say here, but as I was reading that, I thought this is a really interesting place to add some comments because it kind of goes into the environment we're trying to build, which is one of high feedback, an environment where we can be courageous, put ourselves out there, and talk about the hard things in exchange for an opportunity to try to make changes, move forward, and look forward without looking back. It was interesting. I had an interesting exchange. I'll pick on Brittany for a moment the other day, and I think I just said, I look forward quickly, so don't worry about it. I'm just like, pretty much, that was in the past. Who cares? It's this thing. We'll move forward, because looking forward and the way Brittany works and the way we all work, if you think about empowering someone to move forward as opposed to just being concerned about the past, and I truly meant it when I said that, but that's the kind of culture that we want to have here, is one that we can quickly get through the past, call the past what it is. If we need to do something and make decisions about the past, we do. Once we've decided, we move on without regret and we move forward. And so I think just trying to work toward that would be, in case it's not completely noticeable, that is something I'm really trying to build into who we are and what we are here. And easier said than done in a lot of cases, right? I think between Brittany and I, hopefully you feel as good about that as I do. And if any of you have things like that going on for yourself, then get to the place where you feel good about that. If it feels uncomfortable, then you have work to do, right? And so does the other person probably.
Anything else to bring up prior to us going through the list of questions?
While you guys are thinking, I was gonna just comment on what I said I was gonna work on last time. We wanted to, I said I was gonna work on consistency and test my values. And I left and I tried to find myself I found myself more aware of what was happening for the rest of the day, basically. And what that caused me to realize, among a whole bunch of other things, was really two things. It caused me to listen a whole lot more, because I was trying to listen to myself as well. So I was really a whole lot more engaged in the conversation than I was on a different day. So that was interesting. And then I was really trying to observe myself. So it was like I had to use an extra piece of my brain to do that. That's what that was about. And then it was a reflection of something that is not all that surprising. I don't spend a lot of time, just like I try to quickly move forward from the past, I also don't spend a ton of time on positivity and recognition and things like that. So I found that throughout the rest of the day, I wasn't doing a lot of that. And in reflection later, I was just like, what did I realize about these 3 or 4 hours of my day, is that I didn't really recognize the positive moments and say much about it. So those are my takeaways from that afternoon of just being more aware of what I was doing around being consistent, that I'd like to be more consistent in that positivity area.
Any other feedback or experience from sharing your experience of applying any of the lessons you've learned so far? Or how you've been impacted at this point?
I would just say, again, something to keep us moving here is that a lot of what we're talking about in No Drama Leadership is the creation of an environment where we can work really effectively, fast, fluid, have good relationships, and make good progress and do things efficiently. And I wanted to share, some of you have heard of this guy, Jim Alampi, and this other book, Great to Excellent. These two books combined are like, this is a different view. Jim is kind of an intense guy. I saw him speak in person, and he's very intense, but the combination of these two books just reminded me, it just relates so much to what I wrote about the Founders Formula back in 2013 when I first wrote some things out as the 4 things. And it was really before I had received a whole lot of any formal training or read these books and felt like I really understood the topics. It was just what was in my head dumped on paper. But this one is good. He says some really good things in here around delegation, and it feels more textbook, and there's tools in here. I know we've heard in some of the workshops that we do, having access to tools is helpful, but there are some really key takeaways in here around delegation and clarity, but from a much different angle, where Marlene kind of tackles the more emotional side of ourselves inside No Drama Leadership. In Great to Excellent, Jim is really making this pretty black and white, and helping us see things from a black and white perspective, and how everything is very predictable. He says that, and at least in person, he talks a lot about how barriers that we're going to come across daily or as we grow a business are all pretty predictable. And so you might as well just get ready for those times so that you know how to respond when that predictable time comes. And a lot of good thoughts around that. So I would highly recommend this. Would be another book in my top 5, these two. He says, for example, if Matt, I delegate something to you and you're already feeling overwhelmed, when I delegate this big thing to you and your team who's also feeling overwhelmed, and then you don't say anything to me, but I delegate something to you and you take it back to your team and you just say, we've got to do this, right? That's probably not going to end all that well. But if you were to just say, I like the idea, and we've had exchanges like this, I think, I like the idea, so we have these 5 initiatives already happening on the team. Which one of these should be deprioritized in order to accomplish this new initiative? Those are the kind of black and white tools that he's talking about, is just asking that question, and then when you know that day is coming, when that's going to happen to you, get prepared, and then have that kind of non-emotional response to the task at hand or whatever's being delegated to you. And make sure it's not emotional, make sure it's not a passive aggressive response, like, look at me, I'm really witty, right? You have to own the emotion around it and make it black and white. And if you can make it black and white, you can have a really productive conversation around it.
All right, let's jump into question number 1, and this is going all the way to the first page of this chapter. Which is on page 57. So it's page 57. Kenneth is leading the team, EMS team members, and he comes in, he provides this solution in terms of this is what we're going to do to resolve these issues with excess payroll, and he presents it to the team, and what it ends up costing them is time and productivity. It says for the next 3 months, he dealt with negativity, absenteeism, and turnover, and had to spend time monitoring the social media where employees and past employees gathered and broadcast their situation to the world. So I know this takes a little bit of vulnerability and transparency, but do you currently feel like an EMS team member, aka supporting a decision that you haven't bought into? And if so, what are you going to do about it?
What are your options? I mean, whether good ones or not, what are the options? Do nothing is an option that we can just say, it is what it is, move forward. What if you still feel discontent around it? Then what are your options? Ask questions. Do nothing and feel discontent about it still would be another one. You can still do nothing but feel discontent. Ask a lot of questions to understand, right? You're trying to gain awareness and clarity, understanding. State your opinion.
I would say bring another solution.
Yep. Offer another solution.
Sometimes, depending on the situation, having trust in the leadership or the vision of that project, whatever it may be, even though you're discontented, just
Yeah, with engagement, when we talk about it, it's that agreement and aligned action. So we're ultimately giving permission for everybody to seek agreement with it. So even with trust, a high level of trust can mean that's going to speed things along, but if there's not agreement as well, we should be willing to have the conversation. I trust that, I trust you, I'm just curious about more information, because there's, even to be an advocate for why decisions were made, which you started to see immediately when they left that room, it went out and it created this collateral effect of people having their opinions, and they were broadcasting the way they felt. They had an opinion of the decision that was being made, but they were ultimately broadcasting it to the wrong audience. So when it comes to these situations, inevitably, we've all been a part of it, and I'm sure, just knowing the nature of growth and how we continue to move and progress through things, there's going to be opportunities like this, where we notice a decision being made and maybe there's just lack of clarity around it for us. And maybe we're one of a few, or maybe we're one of a many that find ourselves in that position, but to own it and to engage in the conversation in a way that shows a high level of responsibility, ensuring that we want that awareness, we want to understand why something's happening so we can be engaged and support it and know that it's the best decision for the company.
So I want to try to make this a little bit interactive today, and I want to do something here real quick. On page 57, there's a really brief sentence. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. So just ask yourself for a moment, probably has happened today. At some point, our minds are powerful. They wander in all kinds of different directions. So ask yourself when the last time that you were involved in a communication was where you really weren't there, or maybe the other person really wasn't there. And yet this communication continued, and then you walked away with the assumption that you just communicated about something, but you or the other party really doesn't know what was communicated about. And that happens to us, right? It happens to me for sure. Good, I feel better now seeing a few head nods. On 58, and then we're gonna try something out here. I need a couple volunteers, so think about if you wanna volunteer. Communication mastery is about perceiving the meta messages underneath the request. It's about listening for inflection and specific language and spotting the nuances that help you to interpret or clarify the real need. So think about those couple of sentences. You can't do that if you're not in the conversation, right? Like you're really watching, listening, and understanding. So just by quick raise of hands, if you've heard of active listening, raise your hand. So almost everybody. So how many of you have actually done an exercise around active listening? A few of you, okay. So I've never seen this done. Well, I feel like Todd has shown it to me in the past, and so I don't know if I'd call that official training or not, active listening training, but yeah, you were trained. I was trained? Okay, good. I saw it happen. It was feedback happening, and we were in a room, and Tom's not here, but he would appreciate this. It happened to be me and Todd and Tom Altman, and it was an enlightening moment for Tom when that was one of those defining moments for him, where he went from really being a not very good listener to being a much better listener, right? And Kara's laughing. I didn't say he was perfect, but this was an enlightening moment. So here's how this works, and then for the 4 of you that raised your hands, if you want to see it any differently or explain it differently, feel free to do so, but I just need 2 volunteers. This is going to be easy. Rod, Quentin. Okay, so let's just give them the mics. And here's what you're going to do. Basically, you're just going to have a conversation. It does not matter what you talk about. You talk about whatever you want. Rod, you go ahead and start us off. Okay. Hold this pen, or actually, just use the microphone. This is perfect. No, I'm going to give you both the power to speak, actually. This will demonstrate better. Use the pen. When you're speaking, you hold the pen, and when you're done speaking, you give him the pen. And he can't speak until you're done speaking. And so then we're going to talk about it. Just take a minute. We'll just do it for like 1 or 2 minutes so that you can each exchange a couple times.
Quentin, I do not like speaking in public. I do not like initiating conversations. So this is very much out of my comfort zone. And I can see you're listening to me because you have good eye contact and everything. How do you feel about public speaking and engaging in conversations such as we are?
Well, Rod, to answer your question, I'm very sweaty right now. Quite frankly, I don't like this, but I participate because I haven't participated yet. Does that answer your question?
That does answer my question, and I feel pretty much the same way about this, but I have participated, but I feel it is important to step out of my comfort zone, because if I'm not out of my comfort zone, I'm not growing. So this is an opportunity for me to grow, and I am glad that you were able to grow with me.
Thank you. I'm happy to be a part of this opportunity.
Okay, I think that's good enough. I'll take one of those mics. I'll just take them both, actually. I'll hand one back to Jeremy. All right, so can you see, though, while it was a little silly, how productive a conversation is when one person's speaking and the other is listening? There was a real conversation. They were listening. The words that were coming out of their mouths were attached to the other conversation. And it wasn't like what's being said is why did they say that? I said this, why did they say that? Well, correct me if I'm wrong, did either of you have the thought in your head of what am I going to say next while you were talking? Did either of you go there?
Just when I was starting the conversation.
When you started? Okay, Quentin's saying no, so that's good. So you guys were both dialed in on listening. Rod, you even pointed out you felt listened to by Quentin, right? So that's pretty interesting that the person speaking said that you feel listened to. But there was messaging, and that was the eye contact, and the fact that you're sitting right across from each other like this as well, and you weren't distracted in the conversation, looking around the room, doing other things, whatever that might be. Really pretty interesting. So now can you imagine how different that would have been if one of them was interrupting the other one, or if, for example, one of them was talking like this and they didn't want to ever stop talking, and this was happening and then that was happening, and by the way, this and that, and you know what I'm saying? Those are really disruptive conversations. How can the person on the other end possibly want to listen to that, right? So I want you to just understand active listening for a moment, and hopefully what you'll do is just try to go have some fun with it. It's awareness, so that we can just be more aware of our listening. So we talked about it today. Be more aware for yourself, but then how can you take this and introduce it to somebody else? Or maybe it's the way that you want to kick off a team meeting, is to introduce the concept of active listening to the group, just to get people thinking and really engaged with listening to the other person. Because as it says on page 57, or 55, no, 57, yeah. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. If somebody's not listening, it's not it's just words. There was no communication. It was an attempted communication.
I think we just had a takeaway. The single biggest issue in communication is the illusion that it's taking place. Can someone take the baton from Kara for documenting our takeaways for this meeting?
I'll take it.
Thank you. Kara?
Yeah. We can't change too much right away.
Just the seat. All right. Page 60. Move on. So, there's a couple statements on page 60. This is under workplace relationships and communication. Midway through that first paragraph, it says, it is imperative to build leaders who know how to influence employees to be their best selves, rather than make the assumption that supervisors and managers know these things. When a leader says to an employee, "I'll get back to you," and then fails to follow through on the promise, trust starts to erode. So I noted the commitment of the organization and an instance where there's a failure to follow through. And the question became, so how will aligned action with building leaders who know how to influence employees impact the lack of follow-through by a leader? Thinking about it from the context of if everybody is committed to this end, not just the formal leader in the conversation, but everybody, how will it impact these types of situations where there's lack of follow-through?
Can you repeat the question?
Or say it in a different way. I had trouble understanding it.
Yes. So, if everybody is committed to building leaders who know how to influence employees to be their best selves, rather than make the assumption that supervisors and managers know these things, if everybody is, so everybody in the organization, doesn't matter if you are the employee reporting to your leader or you're the leader engaging in conversation with your employee, if everybody is committed to this, and in an instance where a leader says to an employee, "I'll get back to you," and then fails to follow through on the promise, how might that commitment affect the lack of follow-through on the promise in terms of like, what precedes that instance? Because there's choices to be made. So what types of choices do you think will be made by the manager and the employee when the commitment is there to ensure that we're building leaders who know how to influence employees to be their best selves rather than making assumptions that supervisors and managers know these things? Is that clear? Maybe.
Here, I'll give you a mic.
Like in and of themselves, those statements are pretty clear. I'm having a really hard time connecting them. Like the first one says, just do what you say you're gonna do.
Yeah.
And if you don't do what you say you're gonna do, you will lose your credibility.
Yeah.
And then the second one is about leaders being able to coach employees to kind of have their best selves come out. But I wasn't getting the connection between the two
Yeah.
concepts, I guess.
So, should I just jump into where my mind's going on this?
Do it.
Okay, I'm just gonna go there. So here's my mind. So, it's, if we are all in agreement that we're building leaders who know how to influence employees to be their best selves, it means that if I experience a lack of follow-through, which has the potential to erode trust, I don't go to just losing trust, I go to providing that feedback to the manager. Because what we've talked about is we're all leaders, and really the leader is who's taking that position of leadership within a conversation. So we all have the potential to impact that commitment to ensure that we are building leaders who know how to influence employees to be their best selves. So I'm not just assuming that that manager, that leader understands the impact of the decision. I'm actually bringing that back to them as a piece of feedback that your lack of follow through on this it is threatening to my trust in this relationship. And so I provide that feedback rather than just moving on and noting it that they didn't follow through, I'm losing trust. So that's the connection that I saw in the statements.
I would call that accountability, right? In that case, it's accountability from an employee to a leader as you've created that situation, but that's accountability and also support too. I mean, that's FYI, you're not meeting my standards around keeping your commitments, right? That's should be pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Should cause action from that other person, right? Matt, you were in a workshop a while back, and one of the things that was said was was it Chalmers? Imagine if you could keep 100% of your commitments. Who's heard that one? So about half of us, but for those of you that haven't, pretty interesting. It was when someone asks you for a commitment to something, they ask you to do something, take part in something. Your answers, there's only three correct answers, I think, is what he said. These are my three answers. Hopefully that's aligned. It's either yes, no, or I'll get back to you and then you do get back to them. Those are the only answers. And oftentimes we find ourselves being a yes person, like we just say yes, yes, especially in a situation of organizational structure in a company. This is what I need you to do. Okay, yes, I'll do it. But, you know, pausing for questions, yes, no, and further clarification, or I'll get back to you. You know, you're living in that space. But the third item, with the goal of getting the yes or no quickly. So that way you can keep all of your commitments. And, you know, we've probably all done it. Well, I know we've all done it. Managing our commitments can be difficult because there's a lot going on in the world around us and with the people that we have relationships with. But imagine if you could just make that easy on yourself and just say, I'm going to manage my commitments to 100% of the time that I meet those commitments. And I'm also going to make that easy on myself, because sometimes we're people who say yes to everything, and yet when we still do it all, right? But we're not as present as we could be, or we're just doing too many things. It's too much work for the person who committed to all those things. So how could you get to a point, like who is that person out here who is overcommitted and is not meeting their commitments? Is there anyone here who's like brave enough to say, that's me? Okay, Kirsten, who's the person who's overcommitted and feels like you're meeting your commitments? Tammy's raising her hand, Matt's raising his hand. Okay, so we have 3 examples of people who are at least overcommitted. So for the 3 of you, how can you decommit a little bit? And let's talk for a moment about, what if you did decommit a little bit? What if for the 3 of them, they did less? They said no to a few things. What would the results of that? What might happen for you, for the 3 of you, or anyone? Feel free to chime in. Quentin.
The quality of work might be better.
Quality of work could be better. What else?
Less stress.
Less stress for who? For who else though? All the people with the commitments, because you're probably going 1,000 miles an hour, right? Sarah?
I would say it gives others opportunity. If you're unable to do it or you're overcommitted, then someone else can step in your place.
Yeah, interestingly, one of my notes I wanted to hit is in this book, he says, what are 3 things I'm doing today I should delegate to you? And the example of someone who reports to me like Matt or Tammy, you know, you guys are right in front of me here. What are 3 things I'm doing I could delegate to you? Those are things that we could have that discussion if I'm that person and if I feel like that's getting in the way of what I'm doing. What else, Tammy?
I know for me, the ones that I stayed committed to would get a better version of me if I had
Yeah. The people that she stays committed to would get a better version of her.
You would have more value and fulfillment in what you're accomplishing if you're, especially if you're focusing in on the things that are most important to you and whatever you're trying to accomplish.
On the flip side, the other thing that I worry about is I've got a professional commitment outside of Clickstop, and that is coming second to my job all the time. So I worry about my credibility, like just in the community, if I let that fall too. But that's where I'm not meeting my commitments.
Yeah, so that's interesting. That's probably like an offline topic. You're saying a second professional, like SHRM,
Yeah, it's worth
that, yeah. So there's a non-work, well, that's partially yours because that's an investment in, but that's also kind of work related. You want to keep your relationship. Like, what's the right answer there? And my question would be is, who are you talking to about it, and are you making it a priority so that you can at least make a decision, right? Yes, no, or I have more clarity, but like this one is in limbo, right? It's in I'm not meeting my commitments land. So
We also do this in the families too, so, which is not a good thing either, but yeah, it's a conversation I have to have.
all of your peers on the board, yeah, maybe you could have that discussion at the next meeting.
Failing this or being.
We'll give them the link to the video.
What's that?
We'll give them the link to the video.
Yeah.
So we had 3 people in terms of managing commitments that are feeling like they have too many commitments at a minimum, and one of them who feels like they're letting someone down in the process, right? So that feels kind of cruddy, probably for all 3 of you anyways.
So it's kind of weird, but I don't know why I just realized this, but technically I'm also letting myself down, so I guess I am the same as Kirsten. Too many commitments and I'm letting myself down and I forget that.
Yep.
I'll join you. Thank you.
It's interesting, she also says on page 60 that communication, what does she say? These are not just touchy-feely soft skills. These are leadership issues that affect productivity every single day. Yeah. At other times, the action is a way to brush someone off rather than to face the difficulty of saying no. But just the idea that communication, you could argue that like being overwhelmed or having too many responsibilities, the root of that could be a communication issue, because you've said yes, 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 instead of yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, whatever that right formula is, or more clarity and prioritization. And that's a communication issue because you just took it right when it came at you. It could be a communication issue. It could be something else, like maybe you're just dreaming up things you want to do, right? I know that the 3 of your roles are self-guided in a lot of ways, and you can kind of pursue things that you want to. So you could be bringing it amongst yourselves in a different way, not just communication, but yeah, don't overlook the communication part. Matt?
I believe one of the options was counteroffer too. I think there was 4.
Yeah.
So you have the option to say, no, I can't do it by tomorrow, but I give it to you on Friday. So at least you're still being realistic and not overcommitting, but still getting, it's something that you prioritize or need to prioritize, you still have time to do it and do it well.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to skip a question and go to page 62. And it's talking about seeing someone as the same being in disguise. So, at the top, enlightened leaders use what I call supervision. There's the practice of honoring the person in your presence, the practice of seeing something in the person that perhaps he has not seen himself. So we're looking for seeing more in others. And then we have, then the 3rd paragraph says, next time you're in a restaurant, a waitress is running around because they are understaffed, say to yourself, you and I are the same being in disguise. So a question in this is, how is seeing someone as the same being in disguise a necessary component of helping people recognize their potential?
For me, when I read that, it caused me to think, like, does saying that to myself cause me to let down maybe some subconscious body language or frustrations that I've had if she's running around and I'm feeling like I haven't gotten the service that I need? So I think that just levels the playing field for you internally to kind of put yourself in a check, and we all make subconscious body language gestures that we don't really recognize all of the time, but it comes through to other people, and for me that was just a way to kind of check myself.
Feels kind of similar to what Casey was saying about putting someone in a box. I can't remember exactly the context, but you know, we're saying it's another piece of what we've tried to do in our culture here. And if I tie that into the story of my career, which is why some of the things that happened early in my career caused me to want to build a company the way that I did today. And that was that I was 20 years old and this guy was on the way, and I was a college dropout and needed to make money and felt like I could do a whole lot more than what I was doing in the job that I was doing. And I watched my manager run the business, and just thought there was some really obviously glaring things that I would do differently. And also, I had the advantage of being the inside sales guy in a small company of like 12 or 13 people, and he was the boss, and he was traveling and visiting customers, and he sat in the office in the corner, and so I had a whole different perspective on what was happening in the business than he did. But it was pretty interesting because I just felt like I could do more, and I saw lots of things happening with structure, the way that promotions were granted, the way seniority was treated, just the way people treated each other in the building. And it just made me feel like I want to build a culture where everybody has an equal chance to come in, prove who they are today, they can be someone else tomorrow, and achieve something different because of it. And so that again is like a root here of what I've tried to create inside the building, and we have some really fine examples of that around the company, just people who have experienced, a tremendous amount of growth. I picked on Tom a little bit earlier, but we hired Tom as a developer, and Tom has pushed himself to grow. Again, he would say he's not completely where he wants to be, but he's doing an amazing job at investing in himself and growing personally and professionally on the journey. And there are many others that I would think of as well that have come a long ways. And along the way, these are people that have been humbled and have taken the time to realize that they don't all have it all figured out. They've invested in themselves, really in many cases with a high level of intensity, at least for some lengthy period of time, where they're like trying to overcome something. And that's when we're seeing a lot of growth. And when that happens, that's what we want to recognize that here, and have a company that can be opportunistic for those people that are growing in that way. Because we're all growing. It doesn't matter if I think we can all agree at 20 years old, you're probably growing a whole lot more than you are at 40 or as you get older, but the desire to grow should remain strong. And we can all grow significantly, whether it's me and my 42-year-old self or me as a 20-year-old. I'm still driven to grow then and now. Who wants to build off that a little bit and just, I guess, talk about what's a benefit? What if we do that really well? So we have some success stories. What if we just do it really well? Or what happens when it does go well is the question I would ask.
I'm going to say it one more time.
Yeah.
What it is that's going well?
What it is that's going well is that we've created this environment where people are encouraged to grow by leaps and bounds. And to Casey's point, we're not held in a box. We can be someone a year ago and someone else, or someone yesterday and someone else today. Now, there is a test of time, and just being transparent, right? I mean, we've all had good days and bad days, but the longer the time period goes on, the more that change is turned into concrete, and it just is a change. It's a permanent change. So what's going well is that when that's happening, when individuals are doing that, what's the benefit to the business?
I see the benefit from an employee's perspective of that type of environment allows a person to feel confident and know that you can make mistakes and move on quickly. It allows us to be more creative and strategic, thinking outside of the box, outside of just what everyone has known or have been taught in school or what other businesses are doing. It allows you to be more exploratory with what you're passionate about. It allows you to take risks, and it just goes back to the Founders Forum and our core values. I'm tying a lot of that to that, but just it creates a lot of momentum and self-drive within that individual. to just go after it. And there's a lot of success that can come after that, and it influences others who maybe are feeling less confident to find that confidence within themselves and start going after whatever they think their passion is.
That was my thought too. The other thing is it allows for personal fulfillment. And when you're happy at work, you actually tend to produce more. But then you're talking about your job more. So then it's actually helping bring in more of that workforce that's the high quality workforce that we're striving for.
Quick story, going back to, my first interview here, Tim and Sarah Miters, and Tim, you had asked me what this place is all about, and being about like 22 at the time, I was like, something about customers and getting what they want or whatever, and he looked at me and said, no, it's about the people. We'll go as far as the people are here, so that stuck with me, but the growth of the company we tie it to the people we have here, and the growth of the people, the rest of the brands and stuff will come along with it. So if we're operating in a growth mindset against, I think what we'll say a fixed mindset, that mentality goes a long way to the people growing the business.
Just gonna add quick on that, and some of what I mean by that when I say those things is that the brands, look at the brands on the wall, and honestly all of those are quite replaceable, and we could do something entirely different. All of us, we could figure it out. We've got, trust me, there's a lot of power and value in those brands, but we could do it. We could change the name of all those companies. We could sell one, buy one, split them up, do whatever we want. We could figure it out if the people handle that really well. But without the people, those brands erode really quickly. We've seen that happen in companies where a change in people just changes an entire company.
Just being from a military, paramilitary background, you had your leaders, you had your people who were in charge, you never approached them. They were unapproachable because of their rank, or they were intimidating. They wore their power on their sleeve. This is who I am, you were respecting who I am. And day one at ClickStop, everyone was approachable. Cody was my first manager. Cody was extremely approachable, and it went all the way across the board. I mean, at any time I feel that I could walk in or have a conversation with any of the leaders in the organization, and that it encourages people to grow. That encourages people to share their ideas, and that's something that is really unseen in a lot of businesses that ClickStop does do well.
We need to take this to wrap up here, so we have about 5 minutes left. So let's hit some key takeaways. What did we cite as some key takeaways today? I'd like to just cite active listening, just so that you can all walk away, and hopefully a few of you at least will think about putting that to work at some point in a conversation or trying to make some permanent change around that. Try to visualize, whatever that is, a stress ball that you have in your office. And maybe that's what you need to try. If you're really struggling with someone and you can just say, hey, you know what? I have a really difficult time communicating with you. Can we try this? And that would be, you have the ball, you hand them, and so on. That could be quite interesting. I think the other thing that happens to us is that sometimes we keep talking because we don't know how to hand it off, or we don't know if the other person wants us to hand it back to them. But if you can hand it back and forth fluidly, it's a very efficient conversation. So hopefully some of you will try that.
Page 76, it says, until you are clear about what you want, you won't get it. It was underlined in a few of the conversations.
Well, what was it?
Yes. Until you are clear about what you want, you won't get it.
Yeah.
I want to go back to kind of a session one takeaway, but as I was preparing for this meeting, I just thought to myself, I'm thinking, whatever it is, 7 or 8 sessions of this that we're talking about these topics, and I mean, we're going to beat it up pretty hard here, right? When we're when we're talking about it for 7 or 8 weeks, we're reading a book, but what's the purpose? Why do we do this? Because we're replacing it. I mean, imagine if we were doing something else. This is the information in, this is good information, and if it can keep us aligned when we leave here and we can go about our day not in drama, but in utilizing some of these techniques, we're causing change. So hopefully we're learning some things we can take forward, but talking about these things can sometimes feel like doing exactly what the book says you shouldn't do, which is to go backwards and look at things. But we have to be reflective and understand what's happening, what has happened in the past, how we've communicated, so that we can go forward and communicate better in the future. So that's just something that's been sitting with me not all that well, that as we talk about this, it feels like the best examples are things that are to actually go backwards and look at things that, even for ourselves inside, if we're not even talking about them, we're looking back on things that happened. And so we just need to make sure we're still trying to look forward as well, a whole lot more than we're looking back. So here's the takeaway. Look forward more than you look back. I don't know. We'll review it in the last meeting. There was a lot of good stuff in here we didn't get to. The book hits language a lot, and so I continue to say be aware of your language. I think we hit it in chapter 1, but be aware of your language, because it says a lot about what's happening inside of you, who you are, whatever you want to call it, right? But just be highly aware of your language.
One thing you did briefly on was talking about
one thing briefly on, when you talk about the yes, no, or I'll get back to you, or the negotiating, you hit briefly on taking the emotion out of the conversation. I think that's a good key takeaway for me, is sometimes in those conversations it's good just to be black and white and not put your emotion into it.
Yeah. Check out Great to Excellent, that book, Jim Alampi. I want to have him come here and speak. Probably isn't going to happen this year, but hopefully next year. Super good. Before he retires. It's like most of us, this is not himself today. It probably wasn't even his picture when he wrote the book, but my profile picture on LinkedIn is from 10 years ago, so. All right, so we're going to call it a wrap. It's 1 o'clock. We have our key takeaways. We need a volunteer for next time to come up with 5 to 10 questions that can help us keep the momentum going. And what I'd really like to do next time is try to have some takeaways and some things that we can apply that we can each go out and do. So we had the active listening one today. You could take the meeting your commitments one. Those are both a couple that you could run out of here and try to do something with one or both of those. But ideally we can come away with some things again next time that are actionable. So I need a volunteer for next time to help guide the discussion. All right, no volunteer. That's all right, I'll do it. Adam, you want to join me? Sounds good. Adam and I will do it's on Edison. Your reading assignment is on Edison, so we'll see you next time.